Hebrews chapter 13 is a series of, I don't know, wisdom statements, cautions. Some would call them commands. I'm okay with any of that. And in verse 5, right after the command to honor marriage and keep the marriage bed pure comes in verse 5, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Talked about that yesterday or last time, however you're watching this. I think we live in a culture of discontent. When was the last time you ever heard anybody say, well, I've got everything I need? Or much less often, everything I ever want. Well, I don't hear that very often. And one of the reasons I don't hear it very often is because, well, I don't want to shift blame because I'm responsible for whatever choices I make. So if I buy something that I didn't have the money for and had to use credit to get, that's on me. But I will say, there's an industry that is spending billions of dollars every year to convince me and you that we don't have everything we need. This, of course, is the advertising industry. Are all advertisers evil? No, but they have the same objective in mind. What the outcome they're after is you buying the product they're advising, or advertising rather. And one of the ways they can do that, in addition to, some kind of a charming appeal, is to remind you that you don't have this and you really need it. So as a result, and this is not the only influence, but this is certainly a very strong influence in our culture, we have houses full of stuff that we don't use, we got, but we don't need, and now we don't know how to get rid of it. When I was a little boy, I don't ever remember seeing a storage unit as a commercial enterprise. I was in a farming community as a little boy, and farmers had barns. A lot of those barns were full of junk. But in the ensuing years, the last 60 years, storage units are everywhere. And I'm renting one because I got junk I don't know what to do with. I kind of think I'm not the only one in Las Vegas, since I see them about every half mile or so. We are not very good at being content with what we have. I'll grant that in century 1, normal people, the people that this letter was written to, would not have acquired all the junk that our culture acquires. Life was much simpler. I mean, unless you were in the aristocracy, you probably had no more than 2 changes of clothes, one to wear and one to wash. And some people didn't even have that. It's apples to oranges on the scale of economy here. So what the Hebrew writer was saying, was not that you got all this stuff, be content with it. What he was saying is, be content with what you have. And who was reading that were people who didn't have much. That's not us. But the principle is still true. If I'm content with what I have, one of the things that will come of that is I will steward it better. I've got a 2015 car. And it's not because partly because I'm cheap, but partly because it's been stewarded well and it still runs like a race car. Okay. I still wear, the other day I was wearing a shirt and I thought, I got this shirt 20 years ago. And I'm not a great example of stewarding all I have. I'm just a guy. But I grew up in a time where you didn't use it up and throw it away. You used it, and if it broke, you fixed it. Well, there are things now that it costs more to fix than it costs to replace. And so this cycle, this spin cycle of acquire, break, throw away, acquire, break, throw away, that doesn't engender and support the idea of contentment. So for us, the command didn't go away. It's still there. Be content with what you have. So a question, and I don't mean this as an accusation. I really don't. It's just a question. How are you doing with that? How content are you? Now I'm going to get, I'm saying this to me too, okay? If I was truly content and I wasn't in the acquisition mode, would that free up resources to make available to God's people, to the church, my local congregation, and its efforts here in our city and across the globe? Yeah, sure it would. Would it help me make provision for reasonable provision for emergencies that may come? Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is there's nothing about being content with what I have that doesn't somehow show up as a real benefit down the trail. So the question again comes back to, are you content? Am I content? And if I'm not, then I don't know that there's a switch to flip. I think it's a dial that turns. How do I become content? Well, I think he gives us, I'm not sure I'd say this is a full answer, but I'm tempted to, because he goes on and says, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. This is what is recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 31 toward the very end of Moses's long discourse. It's a reminder. You're not on your own. God will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And if I truly believe that, then I could steward what he's put in my care a lot better, because that's not up to me to make sure everything fits and works and I have everything I need when I can't even decide the difference between what I want and what I need. It comes down to this: how can I be content? The only way I know of is to believe that God is my provider. I struggle with this. I'll just be upfront honest. Debbie and I do a ministry with Open Door Libraries that is funded completely by donation. The Open Door Library doesn't pay our salary. Neither does New International, our umbrella organization. The donation of people who have joined us as partners, that's where our income comes from. And there are months that I wonder, whew, is it going to happen? It's a pretty, I'm not, I don't, I'm going to sound like I'm whining. I don't mean to whine, but I will say, we're not talking about big money here. I'm talking about, we live with our youngest daughter and her husband, and we're down to very basic living. And God provides for us to do some amazing, wonderful, delightful, awesome things. But it's God that provides that, not me. As if I need a strong reminder, I get it every month. When I pay my bills and meet my obligations and think about what's ahead on our open door library trips, and I compare income with outgo and think, that's going to be close. That sometimes bothers me, but in moments of clarity, I'm grateful, because the only way we get to do a meaningful ministry is because of God's provision. His promises, he'll never leave us, he'll never forsake us. So we get to do what we have a passion for, and I don't mean this pridefully, but what we're good at. I don't know where you are in your life, but I know you never get done stewarding your resources. The Hebrew writer is not talking about some ethereal concept. This is down here on the runway. This is down at road level. We're talking about financial matters. I suppose the independent, fabulously wealthy don't have to worry about that, but I'm pretty sure they do. I think people like you and I, we're trying to figure out, how do we make the ends meet at the middle? Well, through stewardship and depending on, being grateful for the fact that God said, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'll never abandon you. I'll never leave you desolate. But he also doesn't say, oh, and by the way, I'll make you rich. It's not there. You do realize that in the New Testament, there is no word that indicates that God will make every Christian financially successful. It's not there. It still gets promoted, this health and wealth idea, that God, if you follow Jesus, you're going to be healthy and you're going to be wealthy, and he wants you that way. I could get on a soapbox about that, because honestly, it's a heresy, because the New Testament never says that. There are clear words that there is a life of blessing in following Christ, but he never promises to make me rich. I'm already wealthy. I'm actually already rich if I consider the global scale. It doesn't feel like it most days, but I am. And I'll tell you, when you get past the financial aspects, I'm incredibly wealthy, because I got a family that loves me, a wife that doesn't just put up with me, although she has to. She loves me. My kids love me. I have great friends who love me and care for me. And the last thing is, Jesus has bought my way into heaven and has given it to me. There's nothing better than that. 2 challenges today. Are you content? And how could you become more content? Second, how real does this promise seem to me? I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. My paraphrase is, I'll never abandon you. Okay, done for today. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.